have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Tell me, Lord, what did I ever do that was worth loving you, or the kindness you've shown? Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus, I know what I am. But now that I know that I've needed you, so help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hands. Try me, Lord, if you think there's a way I can try to repay all I've taken from you. Maybe, Lord, I can show someone else what I've been through myself on my way back to you. Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus, I know what I am. But now that I know that I've needed you, so help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hands. Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus, I know what I am. But now that I know that I've needed you, so help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hands. Jesus, my soul's in your hands.
I grew up dreaming of being a cowboy and loving the cowboy ways, pursuing the life of my high-riding heroes. I burned up my childhood days. I learned all the rules of a modern-day drifter. Don't you hold on to nothing too long. Just take what you need from the ladies that leave them with the words of a sad country song. My heroes have always been cowboys, and they still are, it seems, sadly in search of and one step in back of themselves and their slow-moving dreams. Cowboys are special, with their own brand of misery from being alone too long. You could die from the cold in the arms of a nightmare, knowing well that your best days are gone. picking up hookers. Instead of my pen, I let the words of my youth fade away. Old worn out saddles and old worn out memories, but no one and no place to stay. My heroes have always been cowboys, and they still are, it seems. Sadly in search of, and one step and back of themselves and their slow-moving dreams. Sadly in search of, and one step and back of themselves and their slow-moving dreams. She couldn't compete with all of them love-starved women who keep clamoring around at my feet. Well, I could probably find me another, but I guess they're all in all of me. Who cares? I'll never get lonesome, 'cause I treasure my own company. Whoa, Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. I can't wait to look in the mirror, 'cause I get better looking each day. To know me is to love me. I must be one hell of a man. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble, but I'm doing the best that I can. I guess you could say I'm a loner, yeah, a cowboy outlaw, tough and proud. I could have a lot of friends if I wanted, but then I wouldn't stand out from the crowd. Some folks say that I'm egotistical. Hell, I don't even know what that means. I guess it has something to do with the way that I fill out my skin-tight blue jeans. Oh, Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. I can't wait to look in the mirror.
Oh yeah, Mom. It was Mom's Adidas.
I get better looking each day.
She had another pair.
Is to love me. I must be one hell of a man. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble.
Wait, make sure it says Parker on it.
I'm doing the best that I can. Lord, it's hard to be humble.
Scott's present. He already opened it. It's that tractor.
No, we got a present for you.
A present for you.
Who's this this from? Uncle Scott and Uncle Ben and Sarah?
55. So be 55.
I like the dollar a day.
Back down to the
That's interesting. 55 bucks. We're richer.
What's 55 times 365?
Yeah, that. We'll be rich now.
What's 55 times 365?
This is from Aunt Sarah and Uncle Ben, right?
Yeah.
What you got in there?
They're like suction cups.
$2,600.
Oh, wow.
nice.
Cool, yeah, you put them together.
I have one more.
One more.
Suction cup.
Let's see what the card
Like suction
This is here. Look at the card first, Parker.
cup with that.
Oh, that doesn't go with that one. Yeah.
Just look at the wrapping, Parker. What's it say on there?
But I'm doing the best that I can. Maybe I didn't love you quite as often as I could have. And maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. If I made you feel second best, girl, I'm sorry I was blind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. And maybe I didn't hold you all those lonely, lonely times. And I guess I never told you I'm so happy that you're mine. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. But you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. Tell me that your sweet love hasn't died. And give me one more chance to keep you satisfied. I'll keep you satisfied. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. But you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
When I get where I'm going, on the far side of the sky, The first thing that I'm gonna do is spread my wings and fly. I'm gonna land beside a lion and run my fingers through his mane. Or I might find out what it's like to ride a drop of rain. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, there'll be only happy tears. I will shed the sins and struggles I have carried all these years, and I'll leave my heart wide open. I will love and have no fear. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, don't cry for me down here. I'm gonna walk with my granddaddy, and he'll match me step for step. And I'll tell him how I've missed him every minute since he left. And then I'll hug his neck. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, there'll be only happy tears. I will shed the sins and struggles I have carried all these years, and I'll leave my heart wide open. I will love and have no fear. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, don't cry for me down here. With so much pain and so much darkness in this world we stumble through, all these questions I can't answer, and so much work to do. But when I get where I'm going, and I see my Maker's face, I'll stand forever in the light of His amazing grace. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, there'll be only happy tears. I will love and have no fear.
Hi there, y'all. Come on in. Rock a while.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, sisters, let's go down, come on down. Oh, sisters, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the robe and crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, brothers, let's go down, come on down. Come on, brothers, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, fathers, let's go down, come on down. Oh, fathers, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to as I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the robe and crown? Good Lord, show me the way.
Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, while I am waiting.
Thank you.
Yielded
Better bring me up.
and still.
Thank you very much. If I could ask everybody,
Have thine own way, Lord.
thank you very much. If I could ask everybody to go ahead and find a seat, that way the people coming in will know where to sit.
Search me and try me.
Thank you so very, very, very much. You have blessed the family of Wayne Baughman more than you'll ever know. We appreciate you being here. A couple housekeeping things. If you have a phone, could you please silence them at this time? We would really appreciate that. We were debating as to whether we could get you all in here or not. And if you're feeling a little bit snug, just smile at the person you're snug with. Would you do that? If you don't know them, big smile, okay? On behalf of the family, I welcome you. Miss Betty is my joy, as was Wayne. And on her behalf, thank you for being here. I'm D.L. Mitchell, the pastor of Crossroads Chapel, and let me just kind of get the thing started, whenever I would go see Wayne helped me understand an old saying I heard years ago. There's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So with my mouth, I would say, "Hi, Wayne," and then shut up. And I would listen to some of the best stories you could ever imagine. And on Wayne's behalf today, I'm going to exercise that again. I'm going to use my ears and not my mouth. I'm going to get to listen to different people come and speak to us. And with that, I'm going to ask in just a moment for Scott to come stand by me. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Would you join me? Father God, you're gracious beyond our wildest imaginations. You have loved us. And Lord, we don't see any redeeming thing in us that would cause that. You loved us because you wanted to love us. Thank you. Father, you've let an Oklahoma cowboy become part of the family. Lord God, one with experiences that we'll never be able to speak of in its entirety or their entireties. But you've blessed us with him, and you've filled our hearts with his memories. Lord, let us rejoice in this day as we remember our brother, our friend, husband, grandfather, father, as we remember Wayne. Amen. Scott, would you come?
Wow, this is quite a crowd of people. And I know the vast majority of you knew Dad, and many of you played a very important role in his life. And we thank you all for coming today. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing some of the people that played pivotal roles in Dad's life. And so, as we go through this, I don't want to spoil it for any of them. I'm going to let them share what they want to share. But I would like to thank all of you for coming today very much. Dad would have been very impressed with the crowd, and I believe he's probably looking down on the crowd, and he is impressed. But the first person I would like to introduce is Billy Walker. Billy Walker attended the Air Force Academy from 1979 to 1983. He returned to the Academy and was Dad's assistant wrestling coach from 1991 to 1994. And then finally, from 2001 to 2013, he returned again as the deputy athletic director for the Academy, making him Dad's boss. So it's tangible evidence that be careful how you treat people when they're below you, because you never know when they might be above you. So we'll see what Mr. Walker has to say. So Billy, if you would come on up, we'll let you share some stuff.
Well, first of all, saying anyone is Coach Baughman's boss, as all these guys can say, that was a misnomer, right? In name only. So, well, first I want to thank everyone that's here today. Came to celebrate this tremendous life of an amazing man. So, Betty, Lori, Scott, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, thanks for letting all of us be here today to share in the celebration, like I said, of Coach Baughman's life. So since, like Scott said, since I'm the only person that was fortunate enough to wrestle for Coach, serve as his assistant, and later his boss, Betty asked me to say a few words, and this is very humbling. I'll say a few words about Coach from those three perspectives, and believe me, those are three different perspectives about Coach, that's for sure. Rich is going to talk about Coach's competitive life and all his accolades. So I'm going to go really about highlight some of the experiences that I had in my different times with Coach, as well as a lot of guys sitting out in the audience right now. And believe me, we all met for breakfast or lunch, so we've already had a lot of good laughs about Coach already. So I once heard someone speak of the dates on a person's headstone. You noted that the first date was the date of birth, And the second date was the unfortunate date of passing. But in between, that dash that's there, that represents the person's life with all of us on earth. I think we can all agree that Coach Baughman's dash was completely used. He did so many different things, and that dash is a special dash, there's no doubt. So today we're all going to talk a little bit about Coach Baughman's dash. Betty wanted me to talk a little bit about my different roles. So as a cadet, it was interesting, as all of us can say, wrestling for Coach. I was not recruited, I was a walk-on, so I didn't even meet Coach till my first day of practice. However, I talked to him once. I called him up after I got an appointment and said I would like to walk on the wrestling team. His exact words were, "Well, you don't sound very good." She said, "You don't sound very good, but you can go ahead and try out." I'm in my kitchen, my mom's sitting there, I'm like, yes, he loves me. So that was my first experience with him. Later in life, I would share that with him. I'd say, "Hey, Coach, this is what you said to me." He's like, "I never said that to you." I said, "Does it sound like something you'd say?" And then he's like, "Man, I guess so. Maybe I did. Maybe I did say that to you." So that's my first cadet story. Later, he's a master motivator, and this story explains it exactly. We were working out in the weight room one day, and Coach walks through, looks at me and says, "Walker, what are you even in here for? I seen bigger arms on a 6-fighter." Now, he may have been right, but that's not how you motivate guys, right? So my time then as an assistant coach was probably the most special time, because I got to work with a tremendous group of young men that are out here today. I forgot to mention I'm a big crier. Me and Colonel Spetman, I know everybody can put over-unders on how quick we start crying, so he doesn't get a chance to today. So, but yeah, so some of the stories, I think the first one that everybody recalls is we just call it the purple bikini brief story. And I'm not going to tell it, Betty, don't worry. But I think the only people that really know it, everybody else has heard of it, but we're Ciccarello, Thaddeus, who's out here, and Bunce, who's out here too. And Bunce's only problem was he just hung around the wrong guys. So Bunce was not at fault in this, but the other two were team captains for a while. And that didn't last. But I can't get that visual out of my mind, so it was bad. But we did all kinds of things with Coach. Left food at McDonald's is one. Dropped Brooke Leonard off 5 miles outside of Alamosa in a snowstorm so he could make way running in by himself. And a lot of other things with Gatorade bottles that I can't even talk about. But I think some of the wrestlers out there know. But what that did, though, many other incidents that bound us together as lifelong brothers and under the guidance of an amazing man. So that amazing man, then, I came back as his boss. And I say that in quotes because I was never really his boss. But first, let me start by saying Coach had to transfer over to not just being coach, but to being a instructor too, and he was a fantastic PE instructor. But this first story was his first day back instructing. After he had class, Mark Clifford, who was assistant boxing coach at the time, came in my office. He's like, "Colonel, I got to talk to you." I'm like, "What's up, man? Can I shut the door?" I thought, now it's something serious. And he said, "Yeah, Coach Baughman was giving some inappropriate stories in an unarmed combat class today." So I'm like, "All right, got it." So I went down to Coach's office, and he's left-handed. He's always right, and he's got his head down. He's all hunched over or something. I didn't say a word. I just walked in his office. He's like, "I had a hunch I'd see you today, Walker." I'm like, "Yep." I said, how about this for a deal, Coach? How about we don't tell any stories about the YMCA? He's like, "They're good stories, Walker." I'm like, "I know they're good stories, Coach. They're just not appropriate for class." So that one, that's how that one worked out. But the one story that I'm glad was able to conclude the way I liked it was I didn't ask him to pin on my lieutenant's bars. For no apparent reason, I just didn't, because we weren't real close that time. But it haunted me for the next 20 years. So, no, seriously, you know, I felt bad that I didn't do that. So when I made colonel, I was able to ask him, I told my daughter I wasn't going to look at her, so. But I was able to ask him to help my daughter and my wife pin on, and that kind of completed the circle, so I felt great about that. But there is one thing you don't normally do to your boss, and that is take his 17-year-old daughter to get a lightning bolt tattoo. While I was TDY, so I couldn't stop it. Yeah, call me crazy, but that's not something we normally do. So now, when we wrestled for Coach, we didn't always like him, no doubt. But he pushed us pretty hard, you know. However, we always respected him. More importantly, over the years, we grew to love him.
Remember when we were up there sleeping in that little dugout and somebody lost a shoe?
Oh yeah, Mom. It was Mom's Adidas.
And
Yes.
they took it away.
Yes.
What
and
did
she,
you do?
But it's awesome.
she had another pair.
We did not know.
Is that my way of being?
Aww.
Is that yours too?
Wait. Make sure it says Parker on it. Okay.
14 too.
I guess the Academy Awards play music when it's time to get off, so I guess. So we grew to love him, and if Kayla's any indication, all of our children grew to love him even more, and they looked at him truly like a grandfather. So we'll continue to reminisce with our coaches about our great coach here today. But the best story for all of us is one that we didn't even know was happening at the time. Yes, throughout those years of wild young men, Coach loved us all, even Wells. I think. And I think the men we all turned out to be is a legacy for him, for which I think he would be proud. So the next time you're in a cemetery, look at all those dashes and be secure in the knowledge that no one dash can be more meaningful or impactful than the one we celebrate today. Thank you.
I'm not sure if that little interruption was from the other side or not. That was great. Thank you very much, Billy. Next up is a man named Paul Fales. Paul attended the Air Force Academy from 1976 to 1980. So that would have meant Paul was there in the first full class that when Dad came back to the Academy, because Dad was at the Academy from 1965 to 1970 at the Air Force Academy Prep School. And then from 1970 to 1975, he was the Chief of Sports for the Air Force at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. And then we came back to the Academy in 75, where Dad stayed until he retired. Took a year off to do, he was Director of Operations for the World Cycling Championships. And then they hired him back as a coach as a civilian. But Paul was there that first full year that Dad came back. So he was in the first class of wrestlers after Dad became the head coach at the Academy. And then in 1993, not having enough punishment, Paul built a home right across the street from Mom and Dad. And he still has that house today and still lives there today. Paul was also one of Dad's assistant coaches. And Paul could tell stories that he probably won't share today, but Paul, we'll have you come up and share some stories about Dad.
Paul, I'm going to make an adjustment because of you.
Doing the short jokes?
All right, I always enjoy hearing Billy talk. I just don't want to follow him. But anyways, 47 years ago, I was lucky to have this iconic man placed in my life when I was a 17-year-old high school kid from Bakersfield, California, also known as Oklahoma City West. I didn't have the same recruiting trail that Billy did. I just remember being in the kitchen and my mom answering the phone, and it was Wayne, and he talked to her, and she was asking questions, and I walked in the door, and she's got the phone in her hand. She goes, I said, what do you mean? She goes, he's not a very nice man. Even at 17 years old, I knew, because other coaches would call and they'd try to blow smoke up her. And she goes, I like him, I don't like him. And I go, well, he's the only one telling the truth. So that's where we're going to go with. Wayne was in his first year of coaching. Actually, Monroe Ratchford in '77 was the first year of wrestling with him. I was the first recruiting class. And I came back later, like Scott said, to be an assistant coach in '93. Betty brokered a deal to sell me the property across the way. When I was in Wayne's house as a cadet, I'm sitting on the deck looking at the pine trees and listening to the wind. I said, this is really a nice place. I said, one day I'm going to live out here. And Wayne's in the kitchen going, as long as it's nowhere near here. Anyways, 12 years later, Betty calls me up and says, hey, the property across the way is for sale. So I bought it. Wayne was key in my son Adam, 2010, and my daughter Alex, 2017, on attending the Air Force Academy, and both of them are pilots in the Air Force today. Wayne's accomplishments in the world of athletics and climbing are legendary and have placed him in Hall of Fames across the country. I've been fortunate to attend several of these Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. Billy, you started it. We never forgot to acknowledge Betty and her critical support to make it possible for all his success. He tells a story often of his 1962 NCAA Finals match when a 19-year-old Betty got into a verbal altercation with the Oklahoma State coach Myron Roderick, where during a momentary hush in the crowd, Betty screamed, "Myron, shut up and sit down." Everybody in the arena heard it, which meant he wasn't coaching the stud Joe James that Wayne was wrestling in the finals. Wayne won 2-1. He always had kind words to say about Scott and Lori. What many people don't know is that Wayne is an accidental Olympian. He was a distinguished Air Force ROTC graduate from Oklahoma in 1963 and was looking forward to attend pilot training, which went with being a distinguished graduate. He wanted to be an Air Force pilot and later fly commercially. The Air Force saw an opportunity for some great PR, put his pilot training slot on hold, and told him to go train for the '64 Olympics. He did that. He made the team, of course, and wrestled for the U.S. After the games, he went right back to his dreams and said, I want to go be a pilot. And they said, okay, go get your physical. Well, he promptly failed the eye exam. And then they wouldn't give him a waiver for it, a waiver for something that would be allowed today. So he began his extensive wrestling career, which spanned 5 Olympic teams, 16 national titles, and 27 years of coaching at the Air Force Academy. For those who have visited his home office, so crammed with medals, trophies, and plaques that it squishes Betty's laundry room into a small closet, he calls me and everybody that he had worked with pretty lucky for finding the Air Force and later commercially. But I and many of us would have traded that for just a few of the plaques and trophies he had in his office. Wayne and our athletic trainer, Warren Hegwood, believed in the same mantra that the human body can withstand way more than our minds will ever allow. We got no sympathy from either one for wounds that didn't involve bones sticking out. The big exception would be Monroe Ratchford, class of '77, when he was on the mat. Wayne quickly dispersed Warren to the mat to make sure Ratch got the rest he needed during the timeout to finish the match. Rarely was Ratch really ever hurt, and he routinely survived victoriously. Another quick story from the Hegwood years. Wayne was not a flamboyant or low percentage move kind of wrestler. He was a grunter. He just went head on and won all his matches. But he reflected with some pride recently about one of those particular moves called the Brown Slop, perfected by 1979 alum Chris Brown. I think Hegwood saw Chris do this to win a match, and he turned to Wayne to ask, what kind of slop was that? So there's the name. Wayne loved Stanley Canyon, a 2-mile, 2,000-foot ascent that was a favorite treat for flatland visitors and a weekly preseason test for all of his wrestling teams. He even carried Adam up on his back when he was a kid. We also did a winter hike with Mr. Dave Saby when Dave was preparing for a Mount Everest climb. Sir Richard Haynes still climbs Stanley Canyon weekly when possible after being introduced during his wrestling team OR stint decades ago. Wayne was a very sharp dresser. He said he routinely wore mended clothing while growing up, and now he was going to wear nice clothes. From head to toe, he was routinely dressed in a well-fit and pressed manner. He was always the best-dressed coach in the gym. As many of you know, competing with Gable in that category was not much of a challenge. Of course, Betty was dressed just as elegantly, and when they arrived together at functions, they made quite an entrance. Wayne enjoyed eating at just a few select restaurants in town. Mug on the Hill, Tomaine Alley with fellow Air Force coaches, County Line Barbecue with visitors and Western recruits, Schlotsky's with Sir Richard, and Texas Roadhouse with Betty. Being a creature of habit, he routinely ordered the same meal at all of these fine dining establishments. His precise combination of sugar and sweetener for his iced tea was always very entertaining to watch. The trip back and forth to Laramie with the wrestling team included a quick meal at the same truck stop cafe near Fort Collins. His instructions were always no dessert, which I think Gary Chadwick challenged one night with an apple pie. Wayne smashed it with his thumb, and when Gary began eating it again, Wayne tarnished it for good. A few weeks after his foot surgery, Wayne was driving to one of his medical appointments when his support boot got stuck between the gas and brake pedals, creating quite the ride down his driveway and into the woods on a 13-degree snowy morning. Good news was that he found his misplaced cell phone in his jacket with just enough charge for one call. He called Betty, and Betty called me. Wayne managed to open the door and promptly slid out onto the snow, cracked a few ribs, and his protection boot came off. I managed to get him reassembled in my truck, fully expecting to take him to the ER, but no. Wayne was insistent that I took him to his regularly scheduled appointment at the Air Force Academy Hospital. He said that he'll be a little late, but they'll squeeze him in because they liked him. Oh, and we never went to the ER. Classic Wayne. On February 11th, Wayne and Betty attended the Air Force Wyoming wrestling match in Clune Arena, where Sam Barbara and staff put together a very moving tribute to Wayne's life on the Jumbotron. A wonderful picture was taken on the mat with Wayne and the entire wrestling team, along with many former coaches and wrestlers. And we have many of the wrestling team right here today. Thank you for coming. After winning his match, heavyweight Wyatt Hendrickson, who's now the 2022 Big 12 champion and tournament outstanding wrestler, trotted over to Wayne to pay his respects. On the way home that night, in the snow and the ice on the roads, Wayne recited from memory all the lyrics to The Winner, a song by Bobby Bare, which many of us have heard him quote many times over the years, and Al knows that one. Like his dad, Roy, Wayne was a gentle giant at the end. Fiercely independent, Wayne didn't want to be a burden on anyone. He was hurting, as one could imagine, but he continued to talk. He continued to talk about his life blessings, wonderful years with Betty and family, plus the many friends he had made in his lifetime. The night before his dad, Roy, passed years ago, I wandered across the street for a visit, and ended up doing the same with Wayne on February 15th. Wayne will always be a winner in this kid from Bakersfield's mind, and so many others whose lives he touched. We'll miss you, St. Wayne the Just, and sometimes not so just. Godspeed, and thank you for the wonderful memories and endless stories.
Are we going to play the tribute slides from the Academy? Yeah.
I ain't lived forever, but I've lived enough. And I've learned to be gentle, and I've learned to be tough. I found only two things that last till the end. One is your heroes, the other's your friends. Your heroes will help you find good in yourself. Your friends won't forsake you for somebody else. They'll both stand beside you through thick and through thin. And that's how it goes with heroes and friends. I grew up with cowboys I watched on TV. My friends and I sometimes pretended to be. Years have gone by, but now and again my heart rides the range with my heroes and friends. Your heroes will help you find good in yourself. Your friends won't forsake you for somebody else. They'll both stand beside you through thick and through thin. And that's how it goes with heroes and friends. And that's how it goes with heroes and friends.
I was doing pretty good till I saw the slideshow. So next we have Alan Arata coming up to speak. Alan met Dad in 1965 when we were first stationed at the Academy, or when Dad was first stationed at the Academy, when Alan was just 4 years old. Many years later, Dad helped Alan get into the Air Force sports program when Dad was Chief of Sports for the Air Force. Wayne and Alan were also climbing buddies and good friends for many years, both attending this church for many, many years. The one thing that I remember very clearly was Dad and Alan's dad and I, early one morning we went and we climbed Mount Massive, which is the second highest mountain in the state of Colorado. And we got up and got down fairly quickly, and it was just a little after lunch, and Dad said, well, let's go do Mount Elbert. And Alan and his dad were like, we've already done Mount Elbert, we're good. And the trailhead for both mountains is right there together. And Mount Elbert is the tallest mountain in the state of Colorado. And I really didn't want to do that. But Dad said, well, we can get started, and if you change your mind, we can always come back down. Well, we made it to the top of Mount Elbert, and there was a couple camping up there making some Kraft Deluxe macaroni and cheese. I thought about killing both of them just to eat macaroni and cheese. And then on the way down, it did get dark, and the final trip back to the base camp there, we were going through all kinds of mosquitoes and fighting our way down the path in the dark, and it was quite an adventure. But anyway, Alan was along for the first half of that day, so Alan, if you'll come up and share some stuff with Dad, that would be great.
Yeah, I
weren't quite stupid enough to do that mountain too. But on the other hand, we also went up that one in the dark and came down and stumbled all the way back to base camp. I'm Alan Arata. My middle name is Wayne. Billy, this is your fault. I was told when I was young I was named after my father's friend Wayne. And Wayne Baughman was my father's very, very, very good friend. So when you're named after Wayne, you idolize Wayne. And so much so that I just wanted to be like him. And it wasn't really hard because I know you're supposed to kind of idolize your father and everything, but my father idolized Wayne. So, that wasn't really hard to do. If Wayne wasn't telling me stories, my dad was telling me stories about Wayne. And they became good friends. They did a lot of things together. 1965, that's when the Baughmans moved to the Air Force Academy, and there was mountain climbing, there was fishing, there was skiing. Wayne always wore his cowboy hat to ski, no matter how cold it was. We were in the athletic department together, Wayne and I were, and we actually had an office next to each other for 2 years. And then for, I don't know how many years, the last 10 years or so, Wayne and Betty were attending this church, and of course we would sit next to them. And I always wanted to be like Wayne, and actually, it was somewhere when I was about 19, I kind of figured out that when Wayne got to the Air Force Academy, we'd been there for a couple of years, and that was the first time my dad met him. So I wasn't actually named after Wayne Baughman. But by that time it was a little late because it had already been kind of ingrained in me. And I used to always ask myself, what would Wayne do? And so a few years ago, I woke up in the morning. I had to do something for Wayne that morning, and I was really hurting. Something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. And my wife Kim says, yeah, we need to go to the hospital. I said, I got to go do this. And so I did it, and as soon as I was done, I said, let's go to the hospital. And a little bit later, my appendix came out. And I was telling Wayne about this, and I said, I just asked myself, what would Wayne do? And he told me, he goes, if you ever ask yourself, what would Wayne do? You should, and you know what Wayne would do, you should do the opposite. But 1965 at the Air Force Academy was a really special time. It was new, really pretty new still. And if you were a kid then, you had friends everywhere. And not only that, you had friends everywhere, you had like moms everywhere. Because if you were out playing with your friend, like my friend was Scott, and I was over at the Baughman's house, well, Betty fed us. And I ate at a lot of different places in those days and had maybe like 3 moms that were kind of, my second mom at the time. But Betty has been the one that has stayed with me the longest. Betty was also our realtor. So that's kind of another thing. And today I actually do real estate as well, and I've always tried to model myself after the way Betty was. In 1965, they invited me to go on a ride with them. And they had it wasn't a Jeep, it was like a Scout. I don't know what a Scout, yeah, it's like a Jeep. We'll call it a Jeep. And except for this was something a little different than today's Jeeps. The back seats didn't have any seat belts in it. International Scout Harvester or something, International Harvester Scout. Yeah, and I don't think it had a roof on it either, as far as I remember. Did it? No, it didn't. That's right. Okay. And we were going up this road. We went behind the fire station, and I was only 4, so that part maybe not quite as good in my memory. But we were going along the side of the mountain, and the road was about as wide as the tires on the car. And I remember getting bounced up one time, and I looked down, and I was like, 4 things I remember from that time. Number 1, when I bounced up and looked down, that I might die. And the second was, I looked over at Betty, and honestly, she was just cool and calm and just like nothing's going on. I looked at Wayne, and I thought, he's a little bit crazy. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to sit next to Betty on the way back down because Scott will be on the other side next to the cliff. And, Scott and I did have a chance to go mountain climbing together with Wayne. If you ever went mountain climbing with Wayne and did one of the 14ers, by the way, this was before this even became popular. We were out there doing it. How it was popular. They used to have these little scrolls in the containers, and you'd have to sign in. And you could see signatures back on these scrolls from, 1972 or so. And this was probably like 75. But that tells you that there were not that many people out there doing it. Now it's super, super popular and everything. But if you ever went with Wayne, he gave you a deck of cards at some point in time. And about 7 years ago, he was passing out these decks of cards to for anybody that climbed the 14ers with him. We've heard about Stanley Canyon. That kind of started about that same time, too. There was a lot of good fishing up in Stanley Canyon, and my father and I used to go up there to fish, and Wayne found out about that. And next thing you know, there's a contest of how fast you can get up there. And I know at one time Wayne held the record with about 28 minutes or something like that, and then everybody was trying to beat Wayne's record. I think this is kind of how this whole progression of things started, going through that. Wayne did become the head of Air Force Sports, and that was really important to me because he did help me get into that program. And I got a chance to go overseas and compete internationally for a number of years, but really the best thing that came out of that program was I met my wife. So Wayne's responsible for that. As director for USA Cycling, that kind of got Wayne into cycling. And from there, he ended up getting some pretty neat bikes. And next thing you know, there's this new sport coming out called triathlon. And, they get really long, so Wayne's got to do it. And so there's one really big problem, and that is he's got to learn to swim. Because if you've ever seen a wrestler in the water, it's not a pretty sight. And I heard about this, so I had to come down and watch Wayne in the water, and my father was working with him. And my father was a great swim coach, but not that great. Actually, he did teach Wayne how to swim well enough for Wayne to compete. But I tell you what, it's hard enough doing the cycle and the run afterwards. But when you have to struggle every single stroke to swim and just can't glide along like a swimmer could do, it makes it even harder, and that's the way Wayne liked it. So from endurance events like triathlon and the Pikes Peak Marathon, and then there was, that's not long enough. How about this 100-mile race out in Leadville, the Leadville 100? Got to do that. And how about running the rim to rim with a broken bone in his foot? And then, there's just the worst of them all, the Badwater 135-mile run through Death Valley. Got to do that. But I want to talk a little bit about the Leadville 100, and it's no coincidence that Wayne rhymes with pain. Because Wayne just had to do that thing. And I asked him, I said, Wayne, how are you going to train for this? And he goes, well, I'm running 4.7 miles a day. I said, 4.7 miles a day? He said, yeah. I go down Stagecoach Road to 83, to Northgate, to Roller Coaster, and back up Stagecoach again. You're in for some pain, Wayne. So who'd go with him? Betty and my dad. And they're out there this is the first time he did it. He was stupid enough to do it more than once. Yeah, okay. Especially after this first time, because Wayne didn't actually feel pain, maybe like the rest of us. But Betty pretty much nursed him all the way through, and my father encouraged him. And the last 20 miles, my father's encouragement was basically pushing him, physically pushing him the last 20 miles. And one point in time, Wayne turned around and said, such a good thing, I'm tired, so tired right now, or I would kick your butt. Which time my father put his foot between Wayne's two cheeks and gave him another push. In the last bit of time, I've tried to think of a word to describe Wayne. And I decided that there really wasn't a word to describe Wayne. He was more than just one word. There's a lot of words you'd have to use to describe him. But on Thursday, I actually came up with a word to describe him. And the word is fearless. He really was. He wasn't afraid of those things. You know there was going to be great pain, but he wasn't ever afraid of that. And 400 times in the Bible it says, fear not. It's actually the most repeated commandment in the Bible. We weren't really meant to have fear. And Wayne was the example of that, more so than anybody, I think anybody in here has ever met. I know that that we're all here because we've suffered a great loss with Wayne. And I know that we've all lost other people too. I mean, their grandfathers, fathers, grandmothers, mothers, you know, siblings and spouses and children. But we're still here for a reason. If God didn't want us here, he wouldn't have us here anymore. If you don't know what that reason is for you, this is Wayne's church here. Church services at 10:15 on Sunday mornings. Come visit. But I'm not going to tell you right now that knowing where you're going and living a Christian life is going to be an easy choice. It's like the Badwater 135-mile run. It's tough. It's tough for all of us. But if you are in that situation and you find yourself with fear, I just want you to do one thing. Ask yourself, what would Wayne do? And if you know what Wayne would do in that situation, do it.
Next up, we have Rich Bender, who's the Executive Director of USA Wrestling and a current member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Rich met Dad in 1988 when Rich was an intern at USA Wrestling. He considered Dad a good friend, mentor, and role model from the time they met until just recently when Dad passed away. So, Rich, please come up and share a few thoughts about Dad.
Afternoon. Betty, Scott, Lori, thank you so much for the honor to be able to briefly speak today about your dad and your husband. Our hearts break with yours, and I just pray that God grants you his peace at this tough time. Sometimes the distance between what we think we want to say and what we actually say is unbridgeable. No matter how much we rearrange and arrange our words, they still seem to not do justice to our deep, true feelings. And I'm hopeful that today my words might get close. I'm Rich Bender, the Executive Director of USA Wrestling, and I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Wayne early in my time here in Colorado Springs. As a young intern with the U.S. Olympic Committee in the summer of 1980, I was introduced to Wayne, and our 30-year-plus friendship began. Wrestling historian Mike Chapman once described Wayne in this way. He is known as a wrestler who would go all out in every match. He was always in superb condition. His mental approach to the sport was second to none. A gentleman, an Air Force officer. Off the mat, he ran marathons without extra training, just to test himself and his mental toughness. He was a fierce competitor on the mat. He asked for no quarter, and I assure you he gave none. Wayne explained, I always wrestle to hurt my opponent, but never injure, Wayne explained. There's a definite difference between hurt and injury. If my opponent is distracted by pain, he's not thinking clearly about what else I'm going to do to him or what he might be going to do to me. I will not jeopardize the joint, and if a person can't turn to relieve the pressure, but if he can turn to neutralize the pressure or pain, it becomes his choice. Isn't that so, Wayne? Not only did many of us see Wayne regularly at wrestling events around town, we saw him all over the country. Wayne would often come to the office at USA Wrestling and invite us to lunch, and he and I had a standing offer. He said, Rich, if we go to Schlotzsky's, I'll pay. We go anywhere else, you pay. I can promise you I'll never go to Schlotzsky's again without thinking about Wayne, and we all know that was one of his favorite places to eat lunch. He was a huge mentor for me and many I know in this room, and I can finally recall some of Wayne's Wayneisms that he would frequently talk about during those meetings. Dry shoes was one of them. I once asked Wayne, I said, Coach, what's the key to those 100-mile runs you do? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, Rich, it's not complicated. It's dry shoes. I said, well, Coach, I think you have to be a little bit crazy too. And he laughed and agreed. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard the story of the time that Coach had a run-in with the offensive line coach at the academy. In the middle of this intense conversation with this guy that's nearly twice his size, Wayne Headley said that he would stick the gentleman's head up his butt and bounce him like a basketball. The coach wisely backed down, and their confrontation ended. Proverbs 15:22 says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Wayne was always a wise advisor for so many folks that are in this room right here today. And I've been asked today to talk a little bit about Wayne's wrestling life. And as you know, wrestling was very important to Wayne, but it wasn't everything to him. Obviously, his family was number one. One might call Wayne a bit of a Renaissance man. We talk about his clothing, always the sharp-dressed man. And I don't know any other Renaissance men that were quite as physically or mentally tough as Wayne. He's in a category of his own there for sure. But he did have a passion for wrestling and was always willing to help others in pursuit of excellence. It's impossible to pinpoint what part of wrestling he had the biggest impact on. Wayne was pretty much involved in all aspects of wrestling. And if he spent much time with you, he could tell stories about every one of them. Like most of us, he started in folk-style wrestling. He was never a state high school champion. He went on to win the NCAA title for Oklahoma in 1962 and wrestled in the finals in 61 and 63 as well. That in itself puts him on a pedestal as one of the all-time great collegiate wrestlers. But his career and legacy really blossomed at the international level. As an Air Force officer, he competed in both freestyle and Greco, and actually I need to throw in Sambo. That was another discipline that Wayne excelled at. He won 5 national championships in freestyle, 9 in Greco, 1 in Sambo. Those titles, coupled with his NCAA title, made him the first American ever to win national championships in all 4 of those disciplines. He won 8 worldwide Air Force trophies. 15 times he won the inter-service. He won the gold medal at the 1967 Pan American Games in freestyle, and he went on to make 8 world teams. He's a 3-time Olympic team member representing us at the Olympic Games in 1964, in Tokyo, and in Mexico City in 68, and again in 72 in Munich. He served twice as the captain of Olympic teams, and without question is truly one of America's greatest wrestlers in our history. Many of you know him as a longtime coach of the Air Force Academy, where he developed wrestlers over his 27-year stint as head coach, where he coached numerous athletes to NCAA and conference accolades, and helped to elevate the United States as a world power in wrestling, as he trained and inspired generations of wrestlers. Another generation right over here. Many of you don't know that Wayne was actively involved in the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. He served in several roles. We mentioned one of them earlier. His passion was not just limited to wrestling. He was a fan of Team USA in all sports. An author, a wrestling historian, and he knew as much about our history as anybody that I've ever met. In 1982, Wayne was awarded our sport's highest honor when he was enshrined in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame as a distinguished member. Of course, not only what he did for wrestling will be missed, but what we'll miss more about Wayne is who he was. a tremendous presence, an incredible friend, a wise mentor, a loyal sage to so many of us. He was one of those people who was not only admired and respected, but someone that you really, truly enjoyed spending time with. I can say that Wayne changed my life, as he did the same with many other of my brothers and sisters in our sport. Love you, Coach. Thank you. God bless.
Our next guest speaker, I've been a big fan of his for a long, long time. He actually used to babysit me and my sister when I was 3 and she was 1. Dave Saby has been a lifelong friend of Dad, Mom, myself, and my sister. He came to the United States Air Force Academy Prep School in 1965, which was the first year that Dad was there at the prep school. While he chose not to continue on to the Air Force Academy, he has gone on to achieve great things with his company, the Seattle-based Saby Corporation. Dad had the opportunity to go climb on Mount Everest. He didn't make it to the top, but Dave was supposed to go on the Goodwill climb, which was during the Goodwill Games back in, I believe it was 1990. But because Dave could not go, he asked Dad to go in his place, and Dad jumped at the chance. Just one of those other crazy things that Dad did. But Dave was impacted a great deal, as was everybody, by Dad. And I'd like to have him come up and say a few words.
I love the words that all of you have said. Those are words that fierce and all the things that, describe our coach, our teacher, our friend, Wayne Baughman. I know him as Lieutenant Wayne Baughman, but I also know him mainly as Coach. Betty, I know him as Betty's husband and lifelong friend. Scott and Lori, Betty, thank you for letting me say a few words about the great man that was your husband, Dad, and my lifelong friend. First off, as has already been said, Wayne has had a huge positive impact on my life. And Wayne, some of Wayne, I think, lives on in all of us. He affected us in a way by our engagement with him, and that was God's great gift to us. It was his life and his impact on us. When I came to the prep school, you need to have a little background. My mother had 7th grade education, lived through the Depression, never drove a car. My dad had a high school education. College was never thought about. We never had the money to think about it. I lived in a house that all 5 of us slept together in, had 2 rooms. I don't know how we ever got sibling 3, because I can remember my dad's feet as I laid in my crib until I was in the 2nd grade, because they were right in my face about 2 feet away. So I don't know how we got my sister, but those things happen. But I only visit that with you so that you can see the stark juxtaposition of a kid from Burien White Center, which is the wrong side of Seattle, going to Lackland Air Force Base for basic training, knew nothing about the military, and then up to the prep school, and I met Wayne there. So for all those kids like me that probably would have ended up being well, I don't know what we would end up being. I speak today for those kids because without Wayne and the trajectory that he set me on, and there are very few people in my life that have affected me the way Wayne did. And for that, I will be forever thankful. As I said, I met Lieutenant Wayne Baughman in August of 1965. That was 57 years ago. I was 18, and Wayne is 6 years older than me, so he was just a kid as well, just out of college. I didn't know him yet, and I didn't know much about the military except for what I learned from my TI down at Lackland. But when I got to the prep school, there was this lieutenant with a bunch of hair sticking out of his hat. And I thought to myself, wow, this guy must be different, because everybody else, as we know, was pretty well cropped. And only over time did I realize how different and how special Wayne was. The word fierce has been used over and over again, but I'll take it one step further. When you have a friend that fierce, that you really bonded with, that gentleman always had your back, and had your back in a way that few people would understand. And let me visit one moment of how important that is. Being raised at sea level, the altitude of the prep school was physiologically new to my body. One day after a long and strenuous football practice, before I was fully acclimated, I hyperventilated and became disoriented. And some of my friends from the prep school are here, and we all remember that moment. I recovered, but it was a little odd, and probably scared some of the administrators. And there was a little kerfuffle in the cafeteria. At any rate, I recovered quickly, but administrators weren't sure they thought that I would be able to stay, and there was talk about tossing me. Mr. Baughman, Coach Baughman, stood up for me and said, I'll take responsibility for that kid. I know him, I like him, and he's not a risk. But the coach had my back. He was a rookie and I was a rookie, and I was growing up. But there was no doubt in his mind. He stepped up immediately, took personal responsibility, and the rest is history. You know, seldom in life do we have someone that could affect the trajectories of our life in the way that he did. And I often look back at what a different direction my life might have taken if Wayne hadn't stood up for me at that moment. But, as you all know, that's Wayne. He did whatever he thought was right, no matter what the cost to him or whatever he had to deal with. He would sacrifice himself, I believe, if it was the right thing to do at the right time, period, for what he stood for. How many of us can say that we could do the same, called on at any given moment? But Wayne was always there for us. As a result, the prep school experience and some of the friends I still have from there was one of the most valuable formative events in my life. And Coach Baughman was my teacher, and the major cause of that trajectory change. As I said, Wayne and Betty came to the prep school about the same time I did, and I was Wayne's first heavyweight wrestler. In those days, heavyweight was 191 and over. Wayne was a 191 pounder and was still competing internationally, and I was a very light heavyweight, just barely over 191. So some of Wayne's coaching was really me as meat, he beat the crap out of me for months. But as Nietzsche once said, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And Wayne's coaching and teaching and whatever else that was that he did certainly made me into a better wrestler. And Wayne wasn't satisfied just beating me up by himself, but he brought in guys like Doug Blueball from Michigan and other great wrestlers from around the country to beat the crap out of his meat. But what a great experience. Learning from the best, and Wayne, as we all heard, is the best. Improved my skills, made me a much better person and a much better athlete. But that was Coach Baughman's calling. Teaching youngsters like me how to become a man. And he did it right. Another experience where Wayne had my back, we were at the Freshman Open at Laramie, or at the Laramie Open. I was a prep schooler, and the full gamut of wrestlers were there. And an old nemesis from Adams State College by the name of Bruce Blaines, who was about 6'8" and weighed about 300 pounds, and I'm a 191er, and when I get on the scale, I could barely, the ref used to say, well, okay. That was another thing for those of you that were lighter weights. I mean, I always had my bag of oranges and pop and goodies, and nothing made me happier than to open an orange up on the bus and peel it and let the fragrance go around everybody that was spitting and shaving their body. But this guy was way taller than me, and Wayne said, go out there and, don't get underneath him, but just get, just kind of get up to him and tie him up and just kind of bump him a little. And so, boy, I go out there and boom, I bump him, but I broke his nose and he's bleeding all over me, and they stopped the match, and they put a plug in his nose. We start wrestling again, and of course I'm rubbing his nose, and his little plug comes out, and this big gob of stuff comes here. So the ref quick calls the timeout. We come over to the side, and Wayne looked at that and says, I'm not touching it. He handed me the towel, you fix it. I won the match, but it was in the locker room afterwards, and his dad was bigger than he was. And his dad came into the locker room trying to kill me. I mean, he was furious, and I mean, he just came like I don't know what, and I didn't even see him at first, but fortunately Wayne was there. And if you saw what Wayne did to that guy because he was going to touch this guy, you would have been really proud. It was an event, but Wayne, again, had my back. Since then, Wayne, Betty, and Scott, and me, and my wife, and Sandy, we've been special lifelong friends. And I thank you guys for that. We've got great memories. Scott talks about Everest and some other things. And there's just a ton of things we could talk about. And we've heard many of them. But Wayne, the key piece is Wayne affected my life at a very crucial time in my life. But Wayne has affected all of you in that same way. Epictetus says, talkers should do and doers should talk. Wayne was a doer. He did stuff. And it was that doing that saved kids like me and helped kids like me build a foundation that we could grow off to change the world for the betterment of everyone. Coaching, teaching, mentoring, evangelizing, and damn it, just having a good, fun time once in a while. That was Wayne. They don't make them like that anymore. And my song is Heroes Are Always Cowboys. Every time I hear that song, I think of Wayne. Wayne always told me that he thought we grew up in the best of times. 60s, 70s, 80s, the best of times. He said, I don't think I want to be around for the biological revolution and the tech revolution. He said, we grew up in the best of times. I didn't believe that at first, or it really didn't resonate with me, but somehow I think as the world gets more complicated, we've been very lucky, very blessed to grow up in a fairly peaceful time with great guys like Wayne. We had so many great times together, and as my dad always said, at the end of life, you don't have anything except for your trusted friends and great memories. He said they don't put pockets on coffins for a reason. The best part for me was 1 week before Wayne's passing, I was able to visit Betty, Scott, and Lori, and Wayne, and we got to spend 3 hours telling stories. And I showed Betty the smile on Wayne's face, you would think there was nothing wrong with him, because we were in heaven there for a minute. Speaking of heaven, I asked Wayne to put a good word in for me when he sees St. Peter, because I certainly need it, Wayne. Wayne, you were a special man. What you did for me is priceless. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for all you did for me and for so many. Coach, we're truly going to miss you. In fact, I already do. Rest in peace. You certainly deserve it for a life well lived. Thank you.
So now it's my turn to share some thoughts about my dad. It's hard for me to share much more than what's already been shared. Dad was real fond of saying that he was not always the sweet, lovable old man he turned into. But, and he did turn into a sweet, lovable old man. But he wasn't too bad from the beginning, from what I remember. I'm sure everyone in the room has had people who have gone on before us. And when I was younger, I really had a hard time whenever a close friend or a family member would die. And I came upon a story that Benjamin Franklin shared at a funeral many years ago, and it has helped give me peace whenever a close friend or a family member has died. And it's doing double duty right now. My father-in-law passed away on Monday, so it's kind of a double whammy. Michael Simmerman was also not always the sweet, lovable old man he turned into. Fortunately, I knew him as a sweet, lovable old man from the time I met him. But I'd like to share with you what Benjamin Franklin said regarding death. I condole with you. We have lost a most dear and valuable relation. But it is the will of God and nature that these mortal bodies be laid aside when the soul is to enter into real life. This is rather an embryo state, a preparation for living. A man is not completely born until he be dead. Why then should we grieve that a new child is born among the immortals, a new member added to their happy society? We are spirits. That bodies should be lent us while they can afford us pleasure, assist us in acquiring knowledge, or in doing good to our fellow creatures, it is a kind and benevolent act of God. When they become unfit for these purposes, and afford us pain instead of pleasure, instead of an aid become an encumbrance, and answer none of the intentions for which they were given, it is equally kind and benevolent that a way is provided by which we may get rid of them. Death is that way. We ourselves, in some cases, prudently choose a partial death. A mangled, painful limb which cannot be restored, we willingly cut off. He who plucks out a tooth parts with it freely, since the pain goes with it. And he who quits the whole body parts at once with all pains and possibility of pains and diseases which it was liable to or capable of making him suffer. Our friend and we are invited abroad on a party of pleasure which is to last forever. His chair was ready first, and he has gone before us. We could not all conveniently start together, and why should you and I be grieved at this, since we are soon to follow and know where to find him? I thank Benjamin Franklin posthumously for writing that, because again, it has helped me get through a lot of difficult times when people that I loved went before me. There are so many good memories that I have of my dad. And when I start to feel sad or down, I just think about some of the really good times that I had with him. And one of the things that Dave shared with me when he was out here visiting with Dad was really, as we approach the end of our life, the thing that will matter the most to us is the cool things we did and the cool people we did them with. Dad did a lot of cool things, and for a lot of people, he was one of the cool people that he did them with, or they were the cool people that he did them with. So again, I would like to thank each one of you for coming and sharing this. And I will now invite my sister to come up, and she's going to lead us in an a cappella version of Amazing Grace and also share some of her own thoughts about Dad.
Many times I overheard my dad telling people that when he and Mom were just starting out at the ripe old age of 15 and 17, 15-year-old ninth grader that Mom was and 17-year-old junior in high school that Dad was, that they would dream about their future family, and he always wanted a little boy that was just like him and a little girl that was just like my mom. And the joke on him, he says, was that the little girl was just like Dad and the little boy was just like Mom. And that worked out really well for Mom and Scott in real estate and being people-pleasing people. They rarely offend. Female wrestling came in a little too late for me, so I had to find a different path, and I ended up becoming a nurse. But I do remember that my biggest the time I disappointed him the most was in ninth grade when I stopped playing basketball, and he was ticked, because he expected his kids to be athletes. And I just said, you know, Dad, we don't like team sports. We like individual one-on-one stuff. And that's just not working out for me. But a couple things that came up while people were talking. Steve Turner and Jeannie Turner are longtime friends. Steve graduated with me from Air Academy High School. They're the ones that sent us the song Scars from Heaven that Mom added to the service today. They are at Division II wrestling championships with their son Sam. So I know that Dad is luckily can be in more than one place at a time, so he's also there probably cheering Sam on as well. Also, the box that his cremains are in here were made by one of his very best friends, Richard Haynes, who's sitting right up here. And I know that that would have meant a whole lot to him because it's a beautiful box. Dad wasn't always easy. Until the night before I got married, Dad told me he wasn't going to walk me down the aisle. He said he didn't like David. He said, first of all, he was Army, he was a police officer, and he's not an athlete. There's a lot of reasons that this just isn't going to work out. But the night before, he did decide to go ahead and do that because I kept crying, and I said, you know, I'm going to be all blotchy tomorrow, and it's your fault. And so he said, all right, I'll walk you down the aisle. But as soon as they did the wedding march, he was like, let's get in the Jeep. Just get in the Jeep with me. We can just leave this situation. It's a mess. And I mean, it's dun, 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 and Mom's waiting at the front row for the rose that I've got for her, and I'm like, Dad, I'm giving Mom a rose, and we're doing this because everybody's here. And he's just like, and the look on his face and the pictures of walking me down the aisle says everything. It's kind of like, what a pile of you-know-what. But then years later, when I had Benjamin with that husband, he was like, wow, I'm so glad you walked down the aisle that day. Because Benjamin and my son Ryan and Stephen, his grandsons, his great-grandkids, they meant a lot to him. And he did sword fighting with them until at least the last, 2 months of his life. We have swords at Mom and Dad's house. But, you guys with all your mountain climbing stories, it did bring me back to climbing Long's Peak with Dad. And Long's Peak has about 3 or 4 false peaks. So every time that I thought we're almost there, I could see him snickering, and I'm like, oh. And then we'd get to that top, and then we'd realize that there's another peak, and that was the first time I ever cussed in front of Dad. And he was okay with that, because he knew that I was trying hard. But we got to the part where there's a ledge about this wide, and you had to go against that ledge, with your back and just sort of pray that you didn't fall the 400 feet. And every time you hear about somebody falling and dying on Long's Peak, I know exactly where it is. And I looked at him and I said, just how much did you insure me for before we went on this hike? I said, don't you care about us? And he said, I know what you can do, and you can do it. And that's how he made us do so many things, was telling us that he knew we could do it. When I was 8 years old, there was a father-daughter dance in Texas, and we were stationed at Randolph, and he had to go TDY, and it was with the Girl Scouts, and I made it very clear to him that this was going to ruin the rest of my life, that I had to have him. And he had other guys that were willing to stand in, and I was like, nobody is my dad, as you all know. That morning, he came in, he's in his Air Force Blues, and he just said, well, I got a surprise for you. I said, what's that? And he said, I talked to my boss, and I'm going to be able to go ahead and leave later, and I'll be at that dance. And that's how he always came through. He always came through. As many of you know, it took me until I was 44 years old to find Mr. Right, the first guy that Mom and Dad ever approved of. I know that when John put on one of Dad's shirts and it fit just perfectly, Dad was like, I like him. It looks good on him. And it was in my mid-30s, though, that he sat me down and he said, Lori, the mistake you're making with men is that you keep going for my type, the athletic type, the strong, aggressive. And I was like, yeah, haven't you heard of the Oedipus complex? And, he was getting his master's, so of course he had. And he said, well, it's a big mistake in your case. And I said, why? And he said, well, are you more like me or are you more like your mom? I was like, I guess I'm more like you. He said, your mom is easygoing. She has dinner ready when I get home. She keeps the house clean. He's like, you can't go for my type. We don't go for you. And then he went into a kind of prophetic moment, and he said, I realized I'm in my mid-30s at the time. He said, Mr. Right for you is going to be about 50 years old. He'll be easygoing, and he won't mind cooking dinner once in a while. I was a little offended because I was like, I said, 50? I'm 35. And but then, a little bit of internet dating and raising boys later, I did finally meet John. And I just was thrilled that I finally found a guy that both my parents approved of before they ever ended up leaving, and we've been together for 12 years. And John got on the internet when we first met because I said something about Dad being an Olympian. And after he looked it up, he's like, oh my gosh. And I said, nope, this is why a lot of cadets wouldn't date me and stuff. They were always so intimidated by Dad. And then every time he got a chance, he would tell these guys, look, I will sell her off. What's the doubt? What are you offering? But some people didn't think that he was a perfect person, but I think that he was the perfect dad for me. He showed me unconditional love. He showed me what it's like to be a great husband to my mom. He loved her and protected her overall of anybody else. And there were so many stories that I've decided to just go ahead and skip because I know it is getting long, but I am grateful to be a lot like him. I am sorry that women's wrestling came so late. One of the last things that I ever heard him say, I was up at the house. I've been up there a lot the last couple months because they did need a little bit of help and some nursing care. And he was on the phone with somebody, and he said, man, my daughter, if women's wrestling could have come around, she'd have been a 2-time gold medalist. And I was like, he's just saying that. He's just bragging on a daughter that he doesn't have. And then after he hung up, I looked at him and I said, did you mean that? And he goes, I really meant it. He goes, you're aggressive, you're strong, you're mean, you would have been perfect. And I did take that as a big compliment. One thing that Dad always liked was amazing. Oh, one quick thing. This did just absolutely epitomize the relationship that I had with my dad and how things were for me as his daughter. I found this once, I think, in a magazine, and I thought it was so perfect. I wrote it out for him in we call it calligraphy, but it's really not. It's just my neatest writing I can do. But here's how it goes. It says, he walks into the room and everyone looks his way. He is a handsome older man with just a touch of gray. He carries himself perfect with an air of elegance. Not proud or arrogant like some, that makes the difference. The restaurant we are meeting at is lit so very dim, but I can see the other ladies staring straight at him. He is so neat and well-dressed, looking like a movie star, and all the ladies watch him as he walks there by the bar. I see the other ladies watching as he stops to linger, and watch them poke their lady friends and gesture with their finger. I am so proud as I sit here and watch their little show. I'm the one he's asking for, but right now they don't know. I know he'll make me feel so proud when they know that he's with me. What they don't know is he's much more than what they see. Oh yes, he is a handsome man, as all the ladies know, but he is so much more to me than what appearance shows. He is the greatest man I've known and treats me tenderly, but sometimes in the past he felt he had to punish me. I understand his methods now, and all has turned out well. These ladies who are watching him should hear what I could tell. And now he's meeting me today, and it will be my treat. The ladies are still whispering and wondering who you'll meet. You start walking to the table as you wave at me, and I smile. I also feel their eyes full of envy. The whispers increase now as toward me you begin to walk. I smile because you're twice my age, and now I know they'll talk. She is so lucky, they will say. I've heard it all before. But what they don't know is this handsome man is so much more. He's everything a man could be, and he is my hero. And as you reach the table, I let everybody know how proud I am that you're with me and you're a total winner. I proudly say it's Father's Day. Hi, Dad, I'm buying you dinner. Sorry. I wish I could take credit for writing it, but I just found it somewhere. Dad did love Amazing Grace and a cappella without music. And at one point, we were going to do the Amazing Grace in Cherokee until we did our DNA. And he called me and he said, "Tally-ho, top of the day." I was like, "Dad, are you having a stroke?" And he goes, "No, I just got my DNA results back." And I was like, "What tribe are we?" And he goes, "England, London." I didn't accept that, and so I went ahead. We had done Ancestry.com, so I just said, let's go to 23andMe, and they didn't want to spit in a cup and pay for anymore, so I did it. And what came back is that I had more Neanderthal in the database than anybody else except for one man. I asked Dad, I said, "Are you in that database? Did you go ahead and do that?" And he's like, "No, we got it. We already know." Interestingly, they did correspond, so it seemed like both places got the same information. But when I was talking to one of the people at 23andMe about the Neanderthal part, they said, "That is your indigenous culture." So I said, "Dad, we are Indians somehow." Because he really did relate to that culture, and he really admired them, and we have a lot of Indian art. But anyways, we decided not to do it in Cherokee. And so if everybody would join me, and in fact maybe stand up to sing Amazing Grace. It is in your bulletin, if you don't already know it by heart. Take my gum out. Okay, I'm going to do the best I can, and if I sing it in 3 different chords, don't make fun of me, because I do that sometimes. Okay. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I hope you liked that, Dad. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, as my brother said. I know that he's completely honored to see you here. Some of you know that I'm a little more controversial, and after 3 near-death experiences, I have a strong belief that we can all connect with the people who are on the other side. We just often think that it's our vivid imagination when we hear their voices in our head. So I want to say that unless he's saying something really not Wayne-like, if you hear his voice in your head, it is probably my dad talking to you, and he still wants everybody to listen.
Well, I'm sure everybody in here who knew Dad knows how much he really liked to have the last word. And so, along those same lines, a few years back, he recorded his own eulogy. A wrestler friend of his named Dale Walters, who Dad really liked a lot, was killed in a plane crash, and Dad was asked to do his eulogy. And Dad said that was one of the hardest things he had ever done. And he didn't want anybody to have to go through that. And so, without any further ado, we'll let Dad have the last word, if we can play that video.
Several years ago, I had to do a eulogy for Dale Walters, one of my wrestlers who was killed in an aircraft accident. And I decided right then I didn't want anybody to ever have to do that type of thing for me. Plus I was a little concerned I couldn't get anybody to say anything good about me. And you all know that I do like to have or get the last word in. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to give you the gospel according to St. Wayne the Just, my last chance to do that. Now, I don't know how long after this video's been taken that I'm going to pass away or go on to the great beyond or whatever. None of us have any guarantees, and I think that's, ideally we should live that way like we don't have any guarantees. I've lasted a lot longer than a lot of people thought I would, and a lot longer than a lot of people hoped I would. But at any rate, I thought I would take a little bit of time here. The there's no saying about he who dies with the most toys wins, and that's absolutely not true. He who dies with the most friends and the most experiences win, and I'm appreciative of the experiences and the friends that I have. Of course, I also cherish my enemies. Probably have more enemies than I do friends, but I cherish my enemies almost as much as I do my friends, and at least I kind of know where I stand with my enemies. And I've had some of my enemies, old enemies, become my friends, and a few of my friends become my enemies. So things change, kind of change back and forth. Also, I never met the person I agreed with all the time. Of course, I don't agree with myself all the time, and that's why I've changed my mind over the years on several things. I'd like to believe, in spite of what Betty tells me, I did mature a little bit over the years. But I do very much appreciate the friends, many of which hopefully are going to be able to see this or listen to this or have to listen to it, as the case may be. And, try to tell you again, even though we frequently don't do it as much as we should, how much I did appreciate each and every one of you. And, how much I did learn, I think, from a lot of you, and hope some of you learned from me. I was blessed with a long career working with some awfully, I think, exceptional young people, young men in the sport of wrestling, and I think the wrestling community in itself is kind of a family, it's a fraternity, it's sometimes a mafia probably, but a very strong bonded group. I've always been a religious person. I don't know whether I probably didn't represent that as well as I should have. But I definitely believe in God and in a creator. I think I can't help but look around, particularly every morning when I used to do my walks or when I drove to the academy, looking at the beauty, the bounty, the majesty, the grandeur of creation convinces me that it wasn't a happenstance, circumstance, accidental, random thing. It had to be a grand plan, kind of created, carried out, developed, whatever, by some supreme being. And so every morning when I went on my little walk jogs and did my exercises, that was my prayer and meditation time. And I always started my prayer and meditation time out with, praises to the Creator, praises for the beauty, the bounty, the majesty, the grandeur, the perfection, the generosity, the magnificence of His creation and all it provides in the way of food, clothing, shelter, transportation, recreation, other riches and blessings, foreign accessory needs. So that was kind of the first part of my prayer. And of course, secondly, was asking for forgiveness. All the sins of omission, as well as sins of commission, and all the sins that I committed on a frequent, daily, recurring basis, some of which I wasn't aware of, I asked forgiveness for, and it went way, way beyond that. And then also continued blessing, support, guidance, protection, care, those type things for all my friends, relatives, loved ones. And so that was kind of a situation or a way that I started out my day and helped me at least somewhat get my day in order. Now, you all know I was somewhat or very much about pessimistic, sarcastic, skeptical old man, and I was that way as a young man and a middle-aged man, so I guess I didn't change much from that standpoint. But at any rate, I approached life as the glass being half empty as opposed to half full. Or, I believe in the carnal nature of man more than the divine nature of man. I think humanity's only one step away from an animal. I always thought it was a little hypocritical that we always tried to say fight never solved anything, yet the first thing that seems to happen when issues escalate is people go to war. And I think there's always been war and rumors of war. I think there will always be war. How much longer, it'll last. Right now we're in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, it's the issue too of how much are we our brother's keeper, how much should we be involved, how much should we impose, say, our ideals of democracy on the rest of the world when it's pretty obvious that they don't catch on real well. And also, how much can we accept, and I think it's tough to accept that really the rest of the world doesn't like the United States very much. In fact, they're very resentful, hateful, and particularly the Muslim world absolutely would like to see us not only out of power, out of influence, but dead, eradicated, totally dead. So I think, you know, these are things that future generations are going to have to face. I think I've lived through the best of times. I take great pride in the fact I'm not a baby boomer. I was born just before World War II. I've seen nothing but pretty much constant progress, particularly in making life easier for people. Everything's gotten better. I started from a time of no television, no computers, to the situation we have today where, you know, you have computer cell phones and that are also media plays. You can play movies and watch TV and everything else. So we have come a long, long way. I'm not too sure that it's all progress, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know how much longer I'll be around to see what else transpires. But I am a little apprehensive about the future of our country, particularly when you're dealing with, you know, the radicals that really are afraid to destroy themselves in the process of destroying others. Can't think of a whole lot else. I'll probably have to come and update this a little bit, although I don't plan to do it a whole lot in the future. I thought I better get it done before my voice completely goes, and you know, I have a tendency to talk too fast now and all that kind of stuff. This getting old has been a humbling experience. Of course, a lot of people said I deserved to be humbled or needed to be humbled, and I guess that's probably fair too. But you know, I do appreciate all the opportunities I've had over the many years. I had an interesting background. For those of you who don't know, I was adopted when I was 2 days old. I've always been very appreciative of my parents for putting up with me, and I don't think they knew what they were getting into. They probably tried to send me back. I did get the opportunity to meet my natural mother, and interestingly enough, I was never curious as to or anything about my natural parents, but through unusual set of circumstances, I did meet my natural mother, and I knew I must be her son because she could talk more and faster than I could. But anyway, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to experience life, so I appreciate her for that. But I always said if I ever met her, you know, I would decide at that time whether I liked her. Just because she had given me birth didn't, particularly for me, have any close connection, and people have trouble understanding that. But I did meet her. She was a sweet person, and my parents went and met with her and saw her. My mother had always known who she was, and that turned out to be kind of an interesting experience. But you know, I had a good start there. I had the best wife in the world. I fell in love with her the first time I ever saw her. I had decided right then, started conniving on how I was going to woo and win her, and I was able to accomplish that. I've been happy, and she's been mad ever since. But at any rate, I enjoy my family, my children. You know, I've had a great life. I'd like to believe this was a time more of celebration and a time of, you know, remorse or anything like that. Of course, I don't want people out there, I don't want to see you crying, but I don't want people out there jumping up and down and, you know, singing praises in the aisle because the troll is dead or something like that. But at any rate, appreciate you all. I wish you all a lot of good luck in the future, and hopefully we'll see each other on the other side.
Okay, well, it's hard to follow that, but we do have some gentlemen here who are going to present the flag to Mom. So, deal. Before I step off, I would like, if we could, just give a round of applause to DL and all the people that helped put this on today, because it was quite a, we are very thankful indeed.
Years ago, I had a gentleman that some of you may know. His name was Marty Dack, or is Marty Dack. He's not with us today. He is out of state. But anyhow, he had said to me, he says, "Preacher," he says, "Sunday I'm going to have a man and his wife visit." And he says, "He's the toughest man I know." I'm sitting there thinking, okay. Well, I grew up with tough men, and I was always the smallest of the guys I ran with. So when I heard that, I was expecting to see a mountain of a man. And I walk up to this 180-pound, 60-plus-year-old guy, and I'm thinking, really? Yes, really. More than I can ever tell you. Yes, really. You knew him as a tough man. I knew him as a tough man with a tender heart. And most of you did also. I'm going to lead you in just a moment in the Lord's Prayer. I had the privilege of being his preacher, his pastor, for a while. And you could hear him almost wax theological when he spoke. And he and I, a couple times, got to talk about some of the things he mentioned there briefly. I know his heart, as you did. So why don't we put our hearts together? And I'm going to ask you to stand, and then we'll have the color guard come. You see, there was a bunch of men standing around wondering how to pray. And one named Jesus said, when you pray, pray like this. Pray with me. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Lord. Go ahead and be seated. this will conclude our time of remembrance here. Our memories will live on. As you leave, I just want you to know Wayne enjoyed a good cookie. And there's good cookies on the sides of the room, and you're welcome to stay and visit. As you walk out of the building, if your car is parked in a far parking lot, we have a shuttle bus that'll be running you back and forth. But on your behalf, allow me to say, Betty, we love you. Scott, Lori, we love you. Our hearts are with you. God bless you. Go in grace.